Buckle up, folks. This podcast is all about diving into the good, the bad, and the ugly of our bodily, spiritual, and mental experiences. If you are not prepared to challenge your assumptions, laugh at yourself, laugh at me, or maybe even shed a tear or two, then you might want to look elsewhere. But if you're ready to get real, get honest, and get a little weird, then welcome to the Just Chrissy podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy McCammon. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Just Chrissy podcast. I'm Chrissy, your host, and today I want to talk to you about natural health, or I just kind of maybe want to simplify some things. I don't know if you're familiar with Casey and Callie Means, but they are doing an amazing work in the world today. Casey was a Stanford-trained surgeon at top of her class. Her education is probably $500,000. She had all the top hospitals trying to get her to come work for them, and she walked away from it all. Because what she realized is that she was operating on people, and they were coming back, and like they weren't getting to the root problem of what was causing their issues. And so she wanted to go more towards that avenue of, trying to help people get to the root cause, which is what naturopaths and holistic people are also trying to do. I love to say, if you get in your car and the service engine light comes on and you take it to the garage, the garage is not going to go in and cut out the service engine light. He's going to go into your engine. He's going to look at all the parts and he's going to say, what's not functioning properly here? We need to fix it. So why do we do this to our body? When we get a symptom, it's our service engine light. It means there's something going on and we need to fix it. So I love this story. Well, I don't love the ending of it, but I feel like this story is pretty familiar to most of us. We have someone in our life, could be us, who is experiencing the same story. So Casey and Callie's mom, in her 40s, her cardiologist diagnosed her with elevated blood pressure, told her it's very common for women her age, and prescribed an ACE inhibitor to relax her arteries. And then in her 50s, 10 years later, her internal medicine doctor informed her that she had high cholesterol and prescribed her a statin, and was told this was like basically the rite of passage for a person her age, and, basically not a big deal, normal. Do you know that statins are one of the most prescribed drugs in U.S. history, with over 221 million prescriptions handed out annually? I remember going the one time to my doctor, and my cholesterol was like 280, but the rest of my blood work was fine. And I remember, and she wanted me to go on a statin, in which I really felt like the Lord, like the Holy Spirit was like, no, you're not doing that. Don't do that. And so I didn't. But I remember at the time saying to her, all my other numbers are fine. So wouldn't that mean that that's not an issue if all these other numbers seem fine? She was not convinced. And then within the last couple years, I went to a different doctor, and she was like, oh, don't worry. It's like normal for women your age. So anyway, so now we got the cardiologist, we have the internal medicine doctor, and then in her 60s, the endocrinologist said she developed pre-diabetes. Not to worry, very common for women her age. I mean, it was a pre-disease, right, after all. And it's one that 50% of Americans qualify for. She left there with a prescription for metformin. That drug is prescribed to over 90 million times per year in the United States. When her mom was about 71, she was hiking with her husband and started to get like pain. Ended up going to visit the primary care doctor. They did a scan, and she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And 13 days later, she had passed away. I just felt like that's a common story. Not maybe so much, the cancer, but like, in your 40s, it's normal to do this. And in your 50s, don't worry about that. It's normal. In your 60s, don't worry about that. That's normal. her oncologist at Stanford Hospital said her pancreatic cancer was unlucky. Statistically, the average American over 65 sees 28 doctors in their lifetime, and there's 14 prescriptions written per American per year. So I'm assuming that means like just overall they just averaged it out. But I would think probably like as younger, then as you get older, like in your 60s, I think I saw one time that the average, I could be off a little bit, but like over 20 prescriptions, because as you age and as you have symptoms and as you cover those symptoms with a pill, then other symptoms will start to pop out that you have to deal with. But obviously, there is something it's not right when it comes to the health trends for our children, our parents, and ourselves. Among teens, 18% have fatty liver disease, and close to 30% are pre-diabetic. Teens. More than 40% are overweight or obese. 50 years ago, pediatricians would go an entire career without seeing these conditions among patients. Today, young adults exist in a culture where conditions such as obesity, acne, fatigue, depression, infertility, high cholesterol, and prediabetes are considered common. 6 out of 10 adults live with chronic illness, and about 50% of Americans deal with mental illness sometime in life. 74% of adults are overweight or have obesity. Rates of the big C, heart disease, kidney disease, upper respiratory infections, autoimmune conditions are all going up at the exact same time. We are spending more and more to treat them. In the face of these trends, American life expectancy has been declining for the most sustained period since the 1860s. All of the things that their mom went through, they were warning signs. And stick with me here because I'm going to make this very simple to understand at the end. We're going to simplify it. They were all warning sign of the same thing. There's a dysregulation in how the cells were producing and using energy. There is a better way, and it starts with understanding that the biggest lie in healthcare is that the root cause of why we're getting sicker, heavier, more depressed, and more infertile is complicated. And I think when you're in this wellness journey, it can be overwhelming. And a lot of times people will use a medical term with me, and I'll be like, well, what does that mean? Because I feel like they give these like really complicated medical terms to be like, oh, you had a headache. You know what I mean? So like sometimes people say, well, they said I have blah, blah, blah. Well, what is blah, blah, blah? Oh, and then it's simplified. What's interesting though is, okay, so we're getting heavier, sicker, more depressed, more infertile. And it sounds kind of crazy, right? It sounds really radical until you realize, you ready for this? Virtually no animals in the wild suffer from widespread chronic disease. There isn't rampant obesity, heart disease, type 2 diabetes among lions and giraffes, but preventable lifestyle conditions are responsible for 80% of modern human deaths. Isn't that crazy? So if you think about depression, anxiety, acne, infertility, insomnia, heart disease, erectile dysfunction, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, the big C, and most other conditions that torture and shorten our lives, they're actually rooted in the same thing. And the ability to prevent and reverse these conditions and feel incredible today is under your control, and it's a lot more simple than what you think. So here's where we get to where we're going to simplify this. The book that they wrote is called Good Energy, and I like that because good energy is also known as metabolic health. And that may seem like a weird term, metabolic health, but all that is your cell's ability to transform food into energy. That's all it is. Your cells being able to take food and turn it into energy. So when cellular energy production is working well, you don't have to think about it or be conscious of it. It just is. Your body has like this mechanical inbuilt ability to be able to turn food into energy, and it will sustain itself. It'll balance energy. It distributes it to every cell in your body. It cleans up the residues from the processes that otherwise would clog up the system when it's working properly. So when you lose the keys to good energy, so much starts to go wrong. So like when the cells lose the ability to turn food into energy, your organs, tissues, and glands, which are mere collections of cells, they lose the capacity for properly and safely powering the cell, and the organs that the cells make up, they start to struggle and fail. So that means that just about any disease can arise as a result. The problem, simply stated, is there's a mismatch. The metabolic process, or the ability of your cells to turn food into energy that run our body, evolved over thousands of years in a synergistic relationship with the environment around us. But this is the problem. Those environmental conditions around the cells of our bodies have profoundly and rapidly changed in the last recent decades. One, starting with our diet, but also our movement patterns, our sleep patterns, our stress levels, our exposure to non-natural chemicals. These have all changed. The environment for the cell of the average modern human, is now radically different from the cells, the cells expect and need. So I sometimes will say to clients, you have a partnership with your cells. Your cells depend on you to give them the correct food, the correct movement, the exposure to sun, the good sleep, the good water. In return, you expect them to function properly and keep you alive. If you're not giving them what they need and expect, then there's going to be a mismatch. And it turns into bad energy. So good energy is transforming food into energy, inside the cell, changing food and transforming food into energy. Bad energy is when there's a dysfunction or a mismatch. And when the small cellular disturbance happen in every cell at every moment, the effect is really huge, because it's rippling, it's moving out from that cell into your tissues, organs, and the systems of your body. And it will negatively influence how you think, feel, function, look, age, even how you combat pathogens or things that invade your body, and avoid chronic disease. So if your body, that's why I always say, like, it's really important you're proactive and that you are continually trying to get healthier so that your body has the ability to fight off things when they come. Did you know that we have over 200 different types of cells in the body? And when this bad energy shows up, or when you have this mismatch where the food, say you eat a lot of frankenfood, you have a lot of seed oils, high amounts of sugar, whatever it is, your cells are not getting good food that God made, then that bad energy will show up in the cell, and it can have different symptoms. For instance, if you have issues with the ovarian cell, then it can look like infertility, or it can show up as polycystic ovary syndrome. If the blood vessel lining of cell is experiencing bad energy, it can show up as erectile dysfunction, heart disease, high blood pressure, chronic kidney issues. If a liver cell is experiencing bad energy, it can look like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. In the brain, it can look like depression, stroke, dementia, migraine, chronic pain, depending on where the dysfunctional cellular processes are most prominently showing up. Recently, there's research that shows clearly that these conditions and dozens more are linked directly to the metabolic issues, a problem with how our cells are making energy. So if it's not making good energy and there's a mismatch, it's going to make bad energy, and it's going to show up somewhere. It's going to show up somewhere in the cell. So compared to like 100 years ago, we are consuming astronomical amounts of sugar. And then if you start, say, using high fructose corn syrup or just corn syrup and hydrogenated oils, and like you are gunking up your cells. If you're working in more sedentary jobs, if you're sleeping, people are sleeping less, 25% less. And on top of all that, we are exposed to 80,000 synthetic chemicals in our food, water, and air. So how does this show up in our body? Like, what are the first symptoms that you might be experiencing this? Well, they have very simple ways to show us that we're brewing a mismatch or a metabolic dysfunction or bad energy. Increasing waist size, suboptimal cholesterol levels, high fasting glucose, elevated blood pressure. 93% of Americans are in the danger zone on at least one key metabolic marker. So if you ignore the minor issues of signs of bad energy that's brewing inside your body today, you could get much louder signals in the future, because it's not going to get better. If you ignore it, it's not going to get better. You will just continue to get more and more symptoms. So that is why I've made it my life's mission to teach all the simple things that we can do to create the good energy in our body. So you can go back to season 1, and the 32 episodes that are in there are all educational things that can get you started. If you have not listened to those, or you need to go back and review them, they have a lot of information in there. But we're going to continue to learn about what we can do to take care of our body, more details into some of the things that a lot of the things that I taught in the 30-day reset. All right, friends, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like Mel Robbins says, high five. Go apply the things that you learn. Take this information, think about it, and then let's make up our minds to make the changes needed to produce good energy in our body. Let's make ourselves happy. They will say thank you.